Welcome, everybody. This is the Debrief presented by Bright Hire. Today, we're kicking off a little mini-series called Masters of Sales Hiring. We're featuring top sales leaders and their candid stories about how they build world-class teams and hire great talent. I'm Teddy Chestnut, co-founder of Bright Hire, and thrilled to be joined today, our first guest ever in the series, Mark Kosoglow, CRO of Catalyst Software, former SVP of Sales at Outreach. Mark, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Teddy.
I'm going to start personal story. This is all about hiring. You were hired as the first AE at Outreach. Am I right?
I was the first employee at Outreach.
First employee. Why did they hire you? That's a big hire. Why did they hire you?
Because I agreed to work on 100% commission.
That's it. There you go. You need to know one thing. What are they going to get paid on? What was, is that really, did they test for anything else, or was like, here's the comp plan, who's going to sign up for this?
Well, I think my willingness to do that was a large influencer in the decision. But listen, this is what it did come down to is I had been doing a sales blog probably 10 years ago. And through that, I met somebody that knew Manny Medina, who's the CEO of Outreach. Manny and I got connected through this person, and Manny tried to sell me Outreach. And I thought it was like a real company selling real technologies when it was just four founders in this Seattle Seahawks green office. And so Manny and I, through that experience, became friends. And I would talk to him about sales. He would ask. Then I coached him a little bit on how to do sales. And then eventually I was like, why am I not selling Outreach? Like, I believe in it just as much as you. And he was like, because we can't afford you. And I said, well, I will work on 100% commission. He said, we can afford that. And so because we had developed this relationship and because he'd seen my sales approach, my coaching, my advice had worked for him, it kind of made it all work out. So that was how it went down.
An informal but long interview process.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it.
Help us understand the trajectory. You were at Outreach for almost a decade. So from first employee to an organization of how large, how many people were you involved in, ultimately in hiring, right, building a team on the commercial side there?
The AE org, which I was in charge of, had about 160 or so people, leaders and reps by the time I left.
Got it. So 160, hiring decisions plus, many more, I'm sure. What were the things that you learned along the way in terms of the AE profile? Like maybe that changed over time, but what were the elements of the AE profile that were most important to test for as you built the team?
Yeah, I think every company needs to be very careful with this. If you're a disruptor versus a category creator versus an established logo, if you're, depending on your market and the type of personas that you're reaching out to, this can become really specific to what you need. And actually, it's one reason why we did have an entire hiring class not work out at Outreach, is because we're so early, and that was, only a year in. We didn't know what we needed. And so we definitely hired some people that were probably great reps. We just didn't hire the great reps for us. So the things that I've noticed over the years that seem to be generally true is you have to have work ethic. You have to be naturally curious. You have to be able to not only educate people, but make connections on the fly. Like, for example, if I say I'm selling fans and you're hot, most people, for some reason, won't connect. If I buy the fan, I won't be hot. And you have to be able to explicitly connect that and make the connections for people. And then, and coachability. Now, at Outreach, we had some other stuff like around passion transfer, because we were creating a category. You needed to be a little bit evangelical in the sale. And so that was really important for us. I don't know if that's always really important everywhere else. But those are some of the areas that, in general, I have seen be really important for salespeople.
Let's. It's always helpful to have a framework of, right? You got to be specific about your context, and then it sounds like in your specific context there were a couple things that were maybe transferable across everybody: work ethic, right, and intellectual curiosity, but also passion transfer. Let's just talk tactically. how did you test for some of those things? Some of those who feel intangible, or like you really need to be in the trenches with somebody to really know whether they had a great work ethic. Like an interview might be half an hour, or the whole process might be, I don't know, 2-3 hours with somebody. How are you actually getting deep into some of those intangibles?
So I think the important part is to assign that the interview team each can take 2 to 3 core competencies that they feel really great about assessing for, and then you don't try to get them to assess for everything, just a couple things. And then within those 2 things, I asked my interviewers, now I kind of honestly a little bit lost track of this as we got super big, but still the tenets were there, of how do you figure out how you're going to assess for work ethic? Like, tell me. And, if it's like, hey, do you work hard? Hey, tell me about a story where you put in extra hours. Like, those are BS questions. And so you're going to get, eventually every candidate, they're in sales, they know what you're getting at. They're going to sell you on them being a hard worker if they want the job. So you can't do that. You have to sit down. It only takes a few minutes and think, how can I ask this person a question where I can see and experience the core competency I'm after? So let's take coachability. So one of my jobs was always talk about coachability. So what I did is I created a way to do that for me, where I think with 100% certainty, I can tell you if someone's coachable. And so the way I'd started off in the interview, I'd say, hey, listen, I'm going to ask you real quickly, like, help me understand, what are the top 2 objections you get at the end of a deal that really stink? And most everybody would say price, or, there's a competitor that they like better, or whatever. And I'll be, whichever one, I would pick one. And I'd say, okay, great, price. This is kind of weird, but would you role play with me really quickly? Like, I just want to see, I'm going to give you the pricing suggestion. I want to see how you come over it. All right. Then so pause the role play for a second. That's number one thing, is the nonverbal reaction to the request to role play. A non-coachable person will cross their arms, sit back a little bit, kind of look at you. A person that is coachable and likes to do that kind of stuff will be like, yeah, let's go. All right. And so that's the first tick, is like, what is their reaction to the request to role play? Then I do the role play. Hey, you know what, Teddy, really loved you. Great experience. Love the product. But man, you're like a little too expensive for us. We're going to have to go with your competitor. And then I see what they say. Whatever they say is fine. I just, hey, listen, that sounds really good. Quick question though, could I give you a little coaching? Maybe a different way to do that? Again, pausing, that's the nonverbals. The people that are into coaching, I've had people grab their notebook and a pen. That tells me, learner, like, let's go. I've had people be like, yeah, I guess. And I can tell already that they're in a defensive state, probably not very coachable. Then you got to be good at what you do. And so I would be like, well, listen, typically an objection, when you get an objection, it's not the real objection. You immediately responded to me. You didn't clarify my objection and ask a question, right? So what if we did this role play again, and this time you use what I say? You want to see how that feels? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. And again, what do they do? And then when I'm looking, when they're doing the role play, the same exact question, same exact objection. Now I'm seeing, can they apply the coaching? Some people apply it awesome right off the bat. Those are usually pretty good hires. Other people, they don't do it right, but I can feel their brain breaking. I feel the gears moving, right? They're trying to change. I love those candidates. Those are the candidates that want to be better. They just need help figuring it out. Mm-hmm. And then there's the candidate that'll do it exactly the same as they did it before, uncoachable. So that's a perfect example. How long did that take me to come up with? 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. But is it almost a foolproof way for me to assess coachability? Works almost every single time, I think. And so you got to do that kind of stuff to really figure out these non-tangible things.
Yeah, what I liked about the answer is actually like a lot of what you were looking for in the assessment are kind of like the non-tangible things. It's just like the body language, the way you react. Did I pick up my pen and paper and I'm taking notes? It's not just what I'm saying coming out of my mouth, because like that's easier to fake, right? That's right. Harder to fake, like my energy, my interest, my intent. That one, I feel like I've heard that approach on testing for coachability a lot. I feel like that's relatively well established. Put somebody in a moment where you can coach them. And that's like a little microcosm you can create in 5 or 10 minutes in an interview. It seems like it would be more difficult to create that little microcosm to test for work ethic.
Yeah.
Or to test for some of these other intangibles that you also identified were like really, really important. Passion transfer, I could imagine. Hey, tell me something you're passionate about, and like, is it coming out? But give me another one, like work ethic or something else that's like harder. Like, you know, you might just be like, cool, we got to do back channels, right? Or I'll see on their resume whether they like. I don't know, how are you getting to something like that?
So work ethic is a cool one. I actually bring a vacuum cleaner into the interview room.
Come on.
And I say, hey, no, I don't. Maybe I should. No, so for work ethic, this is what I do for work ethic. I think that work ethic is a choice. It's a time in your life where you made a conscious decision to begin working hard. And it's not an attribute. It's a decision. And so if that's the case, I think that most people that work hard remember the situation in which they decided, I will now work hard and I believe in working hard. And so what I do is I say, hey, listen, Teddy, it's really important that you have high work ethic here. That doesn't mean that you work on the weekends or you work all night long, but it means when you're on, you're on. Best work, best ideas, max effort, let's go, right? So what I want to do is I want to ask you a quick question. Let's say that I went to your family's Thanksgiving dinner, and all of a sudden they start telling the story about little Teddy and how hard he worked. Like, I'm at the table right now. Tell me the story that they tell. People that have made the conscious decision to work hard will almost always immediately have a story and an example of exactly what that would be said, because it's been talked about a million times. They've told the story a million times. People that don't take a second and have to search for it. And those are the people where you're seeing that they aren't necessarily tuned in to what you might find important.
You were very specific about this setting. It's a family setting versus a work setting. It's little Teddy, right? So it's like it's early in my life. Like, why did you come to that immediately? Did you evolve that over time? Why anchor in that sort of setting, personal, family, early in life, around testing for something like this?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. I believe that our subconscious works twice as hard as our conscious mind. And so if that's the case, what I want to do is I want to spin up your conscious mind or subconscious mind and understand how it's thinking and what it's doing. And so I call that a visual context question. It's part of my discovery call framework that I do in sales calls. So I just moved it to the interview because that's a sales call just in the same way. And so I can ask you, Teddy, what are your 3 biggest challenges? Tell me a time when you work hard. Those are very nebulous things and big questions that in some ways can feel a little weird. But when I ask you a visual context question, I create a story, and in the story, something happens subconsciously, and now I'm just asking you to access something that your brain has already come up with. So another great example. In the discovery call, I might say this, Teddy, instead of 3 biggest challenge, I'll say, Teddy, you're sitting in your boardroom right now. One of your board members walks in after you just sent him the board deck to preview the next day. He walks in, he grabs a red whiteboard marker. He writes 2 numbers on the board, and then he breaks the marker as he puts a period after the second one and walks out. Like, what 2 numbers did he write on the board? Your brain put 2 numbers on the board subconsciously. You're just not aware of them. When your conscious mind now goes back to retrieve an answer, that subconscious answer is available to it, and I'm going to get a good answer. Plus, you saw that whole story in your mind. You saw your Thanksgiving dinner where they're talking about little Teddy and making fun of you. And it just puts you in a mindset where you're ready to answer the question for real versus I'm asking you this weird disjointed question about something that you aren't commonly just thinking about versus me putting you in a situation where that answer will come much more naturally.
I guess it makes perfect sense. And I had 2 numbers in my head about the whiteboard. That's a different conversation. Did you choose deliberately, again, in that instance around work ethic, you could access that subconscious where it's little Teddy, family, Thanksgiving. It could be like you're at a work reunion with all the colleagues that you've worked closest with throughout your entire work life, and they're all reflecting on the moment where you really showed up, whatever. Like, put it in a work context versus a family context. Does that matter? Or like, are you deliberate about that? Like, again, early age family context for the visual cue on that? Or is it just, that's an easy one to access?
The most compelling answer I've ever gotten to that question was a young man, and he was like, listen, my dad grew up in Eastern Europe on a farm. He immigrated to Chicago and lived in a row house. He spent his entire career saving up enough money to buy the 2 row houses next to him and demolish them, and created a little farm in inner city Chicago. And every morning he would make me work on the farm at 4 a.m. And on Saturday and Sunday, I had to get up at 4 a.m. to help him work his little farm. He goes, he would pay me. And then one day when I was a teenager, I was like, Dad, I don't really want to get paid anymore. I don't really need the money. So I'm not coming to work the farm on Saturday. And his dad said to him, guess what? You just figured out how to work for me for free. And he's like, at that point, he's like, I saw what it meant to my dad. I saw how I hurt him because I wasn't willing to like work with him. I figured out like it wasn't about him paying me. It was about him teaching me work ethic. And this was his dream and how to work on it. He goes, and I thought differently about it for the rest of the time. That's a story. But like, if you ask in the work context, I think you miss that story. And like, I'm looking for the foundational moment in your life. Like for me, I had 2 kids. My wife was working all the time, or was helping with the kids. I was working all the time. And one day I walked in the kitchen and there were dirty dishes stacked up in the sink. And I was just like, I'm done with this. I hate coming to the kitchen and seeing dirty dishes. I hate having to dig something out to wash it so I can use it. I will never not wash my dishes again. And since that day, I can tell you probably a handful of times in 25 years, I haven't washed the dishes the minute that they're dirty. That's just like a conscious decision in how it works. And those are the times I'm looking for, not the work times. But the work times can be great answers too. I've gotten great work answers too.
So many more questions I want to ask you. I know we're limited on time, but I want to turn to building on this kind of, you're asking in a family context, and part of hiring really well is making sure that we're doing it fairly and equitably and giving everybody, even from different walks of life, a fair shot, different experiences and backgrounds, a fair shot. And it's much easier, we know scientifically, for us to connect with people who look like us, sound like us, who we can relate to immediately. What are some of the things that you've helped your teams do to counteract that affinity bias or that likelihood to want to hire people who sound, look, feel like me in the process?
Diversity starts with the sourcing process. And if you get a bunch of people that look and sound like you in the process, then you're going to probably hire that person even if you don't have biases. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was hiring a sales leader, and I put a post on LinkedIn. I had it bumped and had them also do posts of 2 very forward-thinking women in sales leaders in the industry. And they also said the post. And in the post, we all said, I'm not going to interview until I get X number of qualified female candidates because I need to balance out my leadership team. We got 100-ish resumes apply in the few hours after that. Guess how many of them were women, Teddy? 3. How are 3 women going to beat out 97 guys? Like, it's just the odds are against you that you're going to be better than 97 other people versus if it was 40-60, the odds are greatly increased that I would get an awesome candidate. And so we did interview all 3 of them, and all 3 of them, good for them, weren't qualified for the position. So now what are we supposed to do? And I think that, that's an example of like, you gotta start with the sourcing. But other than that, like, I think it's mostly awareness and it's mindset. And outreach and my personal mindset is very simple, is we sell to a diverse group of customers. The more we look like our customers, the more likely we are to identify and relate and figure out how to sell to our customers and help them be successful. And so our mindset is our team needs to look like the world we serve, not like a subset of the world where we feel comfortable. And so when you create that mindset, people understand that maybe somebody is a little bit better technically, but the diverse thought and point of view is so important to the team in general that we'll sometimes hire somebody that maybe isn't the best candidate because it's the best decision for the team. And of course, you line up 10 people, no matter what the colors, race, ethnicities, religions, all that kind of stuff, genders, all that kind of stuff are, you always want to hire the best, but if the best continues to keep you into one vein of thought, then you limit yourself in a more holistic way of thinking. So that's once you get your mindset right and people understand the value, then I think it's easy to be aware of your own biases.
Mark,
That makes it easier, but
let's make it easier. Thank you for joining today. I'm going to show it to my next interview with a vacuum cleaner. Always washes his dishes. CRO, Catalyst, former SVP of Sales at Outreach, Mark Kosoglow. Thank you so much for dropping some knowledge on sales hiring with us today.
thanks, Teddy.
Take it easy, y'all.